Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our next edition of our 49er Industry Chat during the Special Ed Week. We're going to pause a minute as we welcome people into our webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Noemi Guevara. I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here at California State University, Long Beach. Before we start, I would like to let you know this session is being recorded and it will live on our website at csuob.edu/alumni. I also want to encourage you to use our Q&A box located above or below your screen to submit any questions to our chat today for our guest speaker. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our moderator for the chat, Christopher Gutierrez Cook. Christopher is an alum of the Beach. He graduated in 2014 with a BA in communications, and he earned his teaching credential in 2020 in social science. He has remained connected to the Beach as an avid volunteer with us, and now I'd like to introduce you to him. And thank you for taking the time today, Christopher. And now I pass it on over to you.
Thank you, Noemi. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. Again, I'm alum class of 2014 and teaching credential, so I am a teacher. I teach government and U.S. history. So I'm very excited to be here with Taylor to discuss education and just the focus and definitely part of the initiatives in the future of education. So I'm really excited. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Taylor Ellis. Taylor Ellis is a member of the leadership team at Scholarship Prep, a network of public charter schools based out of Southern California. Focused on creating community change by operating university-inspired, trauma-informed public schools for all students, especially those experiencing homelessness or those in the foster care system. Taylor began her career in education through Teach for America in Dallas, Texas, and since then has worked in both charter and district schools, serving TK through 12 students as a teacher, a mentor, a coach, curriculum specialist, site administrator, and a district administrator. Her passion lies in creating community schools that leverage strategic partnerships to become resource hubs for students and families, as well as providing high quality educational programs to close the opportunity gap for those traditionally underserved. Please help me and welcome Ms. Taylor Ellis. Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have this conversation. Before we were hopping on, I think your schools are on spring break. Is that what you had mentioned? 2
of my schools are on spring break. 1 is currently still in session.
Okay. And so I'm on spring break. And so it feels like a really nice time. I don't know. I guess it's always a nice time to have this type of conversation. But just I know what we're going to focus on and talk about is certainly an important topic in terms of social emotional learning and helping those underserved communities, because in Southern California, that's a lot of our school sites across Southern California, are Title I schools and all that kind of stuff. So very excited to have you and have this conversation just personally as a teacher, but also for everyone who's tuning in. So Taylor, I don't know where you want to start. Maybe you can tell us about yourself. Tell us about how you got into what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. I have a little slide to guide me if that's cool. So let me pull that up real quick. Hold on 1 second. While I pull this up, my name is Taylor Ellis. I am from Southern California. I grew up in San Diego, in kind of a rural part of San Diego, actually. Sorry, can you all see this?
Is that then East County?
It is in East County. Nope, I don't want to share this. You'd think that I would figure out how to run Zoom after all these days of having to do it. All right, so yeah, I'm from East County in San Diego. It's built up a lot since then, but it was very rural when I grew up there. I went to school in Santa Barbara, which is really kind of where I became interested in education. So I went to school. I had all of these high hopes of becoming an attorney. I was really interested in criminal justice. And in my 4 years in school, I really shifted that focus from criminal justice to kind of social justice and really found a passion and equity for education. So as I was getting closer to being done with school, I found out about Teach for America and found a lot of mission alignment with that organization. And so joined Teach for America, and they shipped me off to Dallas, where I was a kindergarten teacher at a founding charter school there in downtown. Learned a lot there. And what was really cool about that opportunity is that because it was a brand new school, even though I was a brand new teacher, I got a lot of leadership opportunities that I feel like I may not have gotten if I had been at a more established school. So through that organization, I had the opportunity to do some work with curriculum and assessment with Uplift, which was my organization there. And I don't know if y'all remember, but in 2010 was when we adopted the Common Core state standards. So there was a big need in terms of curriculum and assessment work at that time. And so it was a very exciting thing to be part of in my first couple of years teaching.
It is very cool. And that, just like you mentioned, that was a very transitional type of shift in California public education. But kudos to you for teaching kindergarten. That's a little too much crying and a little too much shoe tying for me. So hat off to you for doing that. That's a lot.
You'd be surprised how few tears there are after that first couple of days.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
So after my time in Dallas, I wanted to come back to California. I missed home a little bit. So came back here, and since 2012, I, have worked in both charter and district schools, mostly as a teacher in the lower grades. But had the opportunity to kind of mentor other new Teach for America teachers, work as a lead teacher at some organizations, and then kind of continued that curriculum and assessment work. I was really passionate about that, which also kind of led me to apply to get my master's in curriculum and instruction at Cal State Long Beach, and always kind of knowing that that was the route I wanted to go. Like I was really passionate about curriculum, about instruction, about assessment, but also kind of found that in order to do that work at a higher level, an admin credential would be really helpful. So a couple of years later, went back to school, Cal State Long Beach, to get my admin credential. And even though I didn't think site leadership was really going to be my jam, I knew that that was kind of a necessary step to be able to get a lens for what it looked like to serve a larger number of students and a whole school, and then later multiple schools. So I had the opportunity to join Green Dot Public Schools as an administrator in residence, and then serve as a site administrator there for a couple of years, which also gave me the opportunity to work with middle and high school kids, because up until that point, my experience had only been TK through 6th grade.
Got it. Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I see, you did Teach for America for a couple of years, and then you ended up at Long Beach State with your master's. Can you elaborate or tell us about like how that transition from being the teacher to wanting to be an administrator? I'm sure you had a lot of conversations and thoughts about like, because it is a night and day kind of experience when you go from the classroom to being an administrator, just in terms of the type of hat you wear. I don't know if you could elaborate on that and how that decision came about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, like I said, I was really lucky I didn't feel lucky at the time, but I know now that it was a very lucky time to be able to get in as a founding teacher at a school with an organization that was growing pretty rapidly. And so I think from the get-go in my teaching, I still had the opportunity to work at an organizational level, really building, what does ELA coursework look like now that we don't have any curriculum aligned to these new standards. And so really having to dive into all of that and present that to my team and be able to be part of those conversations at a much higher level, I think opened my eyes super early in my career to the type of impact I could have outside of the classroom.
Got it.
So I think that's how it started. And then when I came back to California, I actually started with a charter school, and I wasn't a founding member, but I joined that school in its 2nd year of operation. So still very small, still very much growing. And so there was a lot of leadership opportunity there as well. So I was able to kind of mentor some new Teach for America teachers. I was able to mentor people who weren't Teach for America, but just getting into either charter schools for the first time or into the profession for their first year. And so now I kind of had these 2 buckets, right? I had the curriculum and instruction piece at an organizational level, and now I also kind of got the opportunity to coach and mentor new teachers. And I really found a lot of joy in being able to collaborate and like share things on that broader level. And so, after that was first, I would say maybe 3 years, I thought I wanted to stay in the classroom a little longer, but always knowing that I really liked being part of teams and part of conversations that were making bigger decisions for organizations or schools moving forward. And so I found little ways that I was able to be part of that. So joining school site council, at one of the districts that I worked at, or signing up to be an admin designee for IEP meetings to kind of start to get to know the ins and the outs of how a school worked outside of just my classroom. So I think, I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I think just like bits and pieces here and there. And then once I kind of had a broader picture of what it might look like to be a school leader or a district leader, I really knew that that was where my passion was.
I see. How do you, when you were thinking about it, how do you know it being an admin was going to be a better fit for you?
I don't know that it's a better fit, to be honest. I loved teaching. I still love teaching. I miss it a lot sometimes. But I find, and I never thought that I would say this, but I really like working with adults. I think that it's definitely a shift in the way that you lead your classroom versus the way you lead adult leaders on your campus. But I find a lot of like joy and purpose in that. And so to be able to help people find their voice in their classroom or find what they're passionate about and make that come to life so that they can contribute not only to their school, but maybe to a larger purpose and a larger vision, I think is kind of how I knew I wanted to continue in leadership, right? So
Gotcha.
There's that. And then also I do love, I don't know that I could work at my like level, but in like finance. So what's phenomenal about my job is that I still get to be on sites. I still get to be in classrooms. I still get to connect with kids. And so I still have that kind of classroom opportunity while I'm still able to work, kind of on an organizational level.
Yeah, very cool. Very interesting journey. Why don't you tell us about Scholarship Prep?
Scholarship Prep is a network of free public charter schools. Right now, we serve across 3 counties in Southern California. We serve students TK through 8th grade. We are a little unique in that we are really committed to kind of creating these community schools and creating community change. And we do that through really providing these unique supports, including trauma-informed, mindsets to kiddos who are traditionally underserved. And we have a particular focus on our foster and homeless youth kiddos, and are able to kind of work with some of our community partners to really provide some amazing supports for those kids and those families so that they're able to come to school and not only, have the academics, but really be like fully taken care of so that they can fully access all of the wonderful academic opportunities we offer them.
For those who might not be familiar, what's the best way you would define community schools?
Yeah, so I would define community schools as schools that really utilize partnerships to become resource hubs for kids and families. So not just academics, arts, athletics, but really like how are we feeding our community, clothing our community, and making sure that they have mental and physical health supports needs that they need to thrive.
I see. And what ways do you measure that in terms of the impact for family, community, and and it sounds like it's not just for your students, right? It sounds like it's also family, extended families, and stuff like that. I don't know if you can share.
Yeah. So in terms of measuring impact, I think that's an interesting and multifaceted question. Yeah. So for, our Santa Ana campus is our oldest campus. It was the first school we opened, our flagship. And so the program is most built out there. So I'll kind of use that as an exemplar for the conversation. So 21 or 22% of our kids are either experiencing homelessness or part of the foster care system. So in terms of, that as a subgroup, it's a group that we look at in terms of need, and then really carefully monitor progress, right? We do that for all of our kids, but you asked how we measure this. So, so I think that, first and foremost, some of the things that we offer our families is, we offer food pantries, we offer all of the dress code needs that kiddos would need, including pants, shoes, underwear, socks, all of that, any kind of hygiene needs that they might need. So we're really providing a lot of those supports. In terms of how that is measured, we see folks utilizing those things. And then we see them showing up at school, right? So traditionally, if you look at statistics, students who are experiencing homelessness or who are part of the foster care system have higher chronic absentee rates, they have lower achievement scores, they have higher discipline incidents. And what you find at our schools is that because we offer all of these supports, and I suppose maybe it's not because, but there is certainly a correlation. After all of these supports are offered, in conjunction with all of the trauma-informed training that we do with our teachers, and in addition to all of kind of the structural supports that we put in place as part of our instructional program, we see that our students who are experiencing homelessness or who are in the foster care system are outperforming their peers in terms of growth, who they have, similar discipline rates as their peers. So you're not seeing this gap at our schools the same way that you might see them in a more traditional model. And we attribute that to the kind of lens that we bring to serving our kiddos, as well as the actual physical supports that we offer them, with regard to all those basic needs.
I don't know if you can speak to this, but the whole idea about community schools, is this kind of a new concept in terms of the industry? I know we talked about the transition, right, in 2010 and that focus and where we put our priorities. Is this kind of a new idea? Is it new for California? I don't know if you can speak to the broader trend.
Yeah, so I wish I could speak to it more. I think that community schools have been around. More traditionally, we see community schools as alternative schools for kiddos who are leaving, juvie, or getting been kicked out of other schools and just need a lot of extra support. So they've definitely been around. I think that what is different for us is that our whole school is just based on this model, and it's not necessarily as a result of kids having been in, it's not an afterthought, right? We're doing it as like a preventative measure, right? How do we provide supports for kids and families so that we can uplift the entire community to make sure that kids can access all of the educational opportunities available to them? And really, that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about closing the opportunity gap, and academics is only a tiny part of that. And for them to even access the academics, you have to take care of all the other stuff first. So I do think that it's always existed, but in smaller pockets and in a different kind of context. We did recently receive a grant to be a California community school that allows us to do a lot of this work. And so I think that the state is recognizing more of a need for this kind of support in these kinds of schools. And so I do see this as a direction that more schools will start moving, especially after the pandemic, and recognizing the mental health crisis that we're currently experiencing as a result of 2 years of some really challenging times.
It's been a tough 2 years, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Being in the classroom, being back at school, I can definitely see the need, and it's not just, I think we're talking about underserved populations also, but across the board, definitely. I know we still have the slideshow up. I don't know if there was a slide you had with some of the initiatives from Scholarship Prep.
Yes.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, I just want to talk about a little bit to elaborate a little bit more about the types of things you focus on.
Yeah, and we've talked a little bit about some of these, so I apologize if we are going over it again. But I think, when we think about creating community schools, these are some of the things that we feel like we do differently at our school. And so I think a huge one for us, I know some folks on this chat are teachers and maybe not in charge of hiring, but for folks who are part of hiring panels, we really did a shift a couple of years ago around starting to hire for mission and vision alignment. So, what we talked about as an organization was, I can help teach teachers strategies and the standards and how to, implement an academic program, but I can't as easily make you love our kids and make you really believe in the need to provide this trauma-informed support to our kids, which is really the foundation of everything that we do. And so we kind of shifted our hiring model in the types of questions that we ask to really make sure that we're getting not only great teachers on board, but people who are super mission and vision aligned to the work that we do, because the work is hard and we need people who are like on the bus with us, moving in the right direction, you know? And then on top of that, we invest in and grow our people. So all three of our current principals were with us as teachers before. And so we really believe in finding people who love our model and who do our model well, and then investing them and growing them up. We see that with our director panel as well, and on all of our coordinators. We really try to grow from within and provide all the training, all the support that folks might need to do that. We're super excited this year to be kind of rolling out an opportunity for some of our classified staff who don't have
very cool.
Yeah, who don't have bachelor's degrees yet, but who are really passionate about the work and who want to be teachers. And so we are partnering with a group called Rivet, and they are going to kind of help our folks get the education they need to kind of move up in their roles as well. And so we have, that as part of our compensation plan, and really trying to offer all those supports in that way.
Before we move on, and speaking of like the mission, the vision, and hiring, I know trauma-informed teaching is very topical, and they that's certainly an emphasis. They teach at CSULB when you're getting your credential program. When you're hiring, so those, I'm sure there are prospective teachers and all that here in attendance, but do you look for, or what do you look for in terms of quality, soft skills, or maybe it's even a training that teachers have been to? What are those things that you look for when you're hiring?
Yeah, I mean, I think folks who are already trauma trained is great, but we can provide all of that training on the back end. We're really looking for folks who have like a deep love for the demographic and the communities that we serve. We look for people who kind of have like that servant leadership mindset. We look for people who are reflective, right? So
reflective, I am.
Yeah, and I think, at least personally, right? Like I look for people who are listeners and learners first. It's great if you have a phenomenal skill set, but at the end of the day, nobody knows everything. And even if you did, things change as time goes on. And so, the ability to be able to listen, to reflect, to learn, and then to be able to collaborate and move forward are pieces that we really look for. So, when we're doing the hiring, we don't ask questions about how you plan a lesson. I could teach you that. But I might ask you a question about how you dealt with a challenging situation, or, if you disagreed with something that a supervisor said and how you handled that, because we want to see people who are okay with leaning into conflict, but who are doing it from a place of wanting to understand and wanting to move forward as a solutions-oriented kind of mindset.
Yeah. So just to reiterate, you're looking for reflective folks, people who are very self-sacrificing in some kind of way. So those of you who are interested in
I do want to clarify in terms of self-sacrificing, we also want people to like have limits and boundaries, right? Like we don't want people to burn out. That's not how we keep teachers. That's not how we keep good folks. So I think like we want you to come from a place of love and of like wanting to serve a community, but we also very much want to protect our teachers. And
thanks for clarifying. I got the terminology. Sorry, what's the phrase that you use? Servant
leadership.
Servant leadership. Excellent. Yeah. So those who are curious, but yeah. I know, again, you mentioned about developing community partnerships and with your schools. How do families learn about the charter schools, and is there any sort of expectation in terms of fees or anything like that?
So there are no fees, no tuition, no test to get in. We are free public schools, the same way that all other public schools are free. We get the same funding streams. It's all the same in terms of that. In terms of how our families find out about our organization, to be honest, a lot of it is word of mouth. So people like our program, and then they tell their neighbors, and they tell their friends, and they tell their family members. And so that is really how we get most of our families and our students. We do recruitment efforts, right? Like we do put out advertisements and, enlist the help of families who have loved our program to go and, hang out at community events and recruit families in that way. But in terms of how families find out about like our services and things like this, once they're with us, this is actually something we're really proud of. I think a challenge in serving particularly families who are experiencing homelessness is that there is a lot of stigma around that. And so a lot of people don't want to share that is something that they are experiencing or having a challenge with. And so we have an entire department at our school really focused on identification and reaching out to those families directly and making sure that families know the supports that are available to them. We don't, I think when I talk about it with you, I can talk about our statistics and how we monitor, that population in terms of discipline and academics and all of that, but that's never something that's like shared. It's not like that student knows that they are classified in that way. And we're very clear with staff around we don't talk about subgroups like that. The same way that you don't want to call your English learners your EL students. They are just students who need a little extra support with English language development, right? And so the way we talk about kids, especially in front of kids, is really important and can have a huge impact on them. And so I think that's part of, the trauma training that we talked about and things like that. Just having that awareness is huge for us. But we've been able to really reach out to families and identify folks who need the supports so that we can get them what they need. And a lot of that looks like early identification of just kids who are struggling, and then calling and doing empathy interviews with the families around why. So if a student is missing 5 days of school, our liaison, our homeless liaison will call that family and say, hey, we noticed so-and-so hasn't been at school. Is there anything that we can help with? Can we provide transportation? Can we provide school supplies? Do you need uniforms or laundry services, right? So like we're able to help provide services through kind of some of these early identifiers that might flag us that families need a little more support.
I know we have the slideshow up, but before it goes away, I just had a question. I know you mentioned focus on SEL and mental health support, so social emotional learning. How does that look like at Scholarship Prep?
I'm so glad you asked. So in terms of social emotional learning, it's always been something that we knew was important and did okay at, but really over the last 2 years found a huge growing need for. And so this year we implement social emotional learning as its own designated block. It is a mandated part of everybody's day. It is between 30 and 45 minutes, depending on the day or grade level, but it's how we start every morning. And that block includes, some community building. It includes like an actual social emotional curriculum where kiddos are focusing on like, how do I deal with stress? How do I recognize an emotion? And then how do I handle that? And then it also includes, and I think this is something fairly unique to our schools, but I hope takes off and everyone does, is we do a weekly like social emotional screener, universal screener for kids. So kids log in, it's like a how are you feeling today, kind of like a little emoji situation. They click on how they're doing. They have an opportunity to kind of share why, and then anything that they need. And so teachers are getting in the moment kind of information and data on kiddos that some kids might be comfortable going and sharing with their teacher, but a lot of kids don't. And so that's really been able to help us identify kids who might be hungry during the day, or students who might be really going through some heavy stuff at home. And our counselors also monitor that. So, anything that comes up as a red flag, the counselor gets notified on, and that way we can really make sure that we're providing supports to those kiddos. So that's how we do SEL in the morning. And then we also do it throughout the day in terms of integrating power of pause. So making sure that if we just did a test, we take a minute to like do some mindfulness activities, or if kids are getting a little rowdy, like, hey friends, let's take a beat. Like, let's practice the deep breaths and counting down from 10. And those all come from our social emotional curriculum. So it's all very aligned and very linear. So what they're learning in second grade, they can build on in third grade and so on and so forth. And then in terms of mental health supports, we have 2 full-time psychologists, as well as at least 1 counselor on all of our sites. So we have kind of that in-house support. And then for things that we can't necessarily handle outside of that, we have a lot of other partnerships that we work with. We have a couple of partnerships through UCI. We work with Project Hope Alliance. We work with Latino Health Access. So there's a lot of other kind of partnerships that we work with that can kind of help us on that mental health support area that we might not be able to handle in-house.
Very nice. Very cool. Yeah, as a teacher, I can certainly appreciate having a dedicated block to SEL. I think, in my experience teaching, sometimes, you really want to teach World War II and you really want to cover some content, but there's a need to reassess or just reflect, right? And so trying to weave some SEL can be a challenge. So it's really nice to hear that the school has a dedicated block. So we're getting a lot of awesome questions. So in the last 15 minutes or so, I just want to kind of focus on making sure I get some of those questions answered. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to go ahead and field some of those questions for you.
Absolutely.
We're going to go back to just kind of your development as your career.
Yeah.
Mentorship seems to be a very important part of your development. How have you gone about seeking mentors and making that a priority?
Oh, this is an excellent question. I think that for me, every job that I've ever taken, with the exception of my first one, because it was Teach for America and you kind of just get placed, Also, you don't know what you don't know then. So like, it is what it is. But every job since then, I've really looked for organizations and leaders to work under that I really look up to for whatever reason. I think, and in that way, I've been maybe a little picky about where I work, but I feel like I have learned something extremely valuable from the folks that I've been able to kind of work with and work alongside. And then once I'm kind of in those organizations, right? Because you can't meet everybody on your interview process. But once you're there, really identifying folks who have strengths where maybe I don't have strengths has been something that I've really valued. And I think when I was younger, I don't necessarily think I did that much. I think when I was younger, I was very type A, very much didn't want to work in groups, very much wanted to like do things on my own because I thought I was the best at everything. And then I got into education and was like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything. I need everybody's help all the time. So
it's very humbling. It's a very humbling industry.
It definitely is. So I think, I think that I have tried to be really reflective around where I need to grow and the type of leader that I want to be. And I try to look for folks who I can work on teams with, who kind of fill my gaps and also kind of help me learn some of those skills that I don't necessarily have.
Learn from the best. I think that sounds like good advice there. About the pandemic, again, I think it's been a while, a couple of years here. And so, how did your sites, how did Scholarship Prep, how did it adjust and expand? I assume it might have expanded, but how did it adjust through the pandemic, especially given your mission?
Yeah. So, oh man, I feel like trying to remember back to like 2020 is so difficult. It was like a different world then.
Yeah.
I think that what is kind of nice about being a small organization is that we are really flexible and we're able to pivot really quickly. And I think that, not everybody had that luxury. But we had a lot of things that were kind of already in place when the pandemic started that really helped us survive and dare I say thrive in the pandemic. But things like one-to-one Chromebooks we already had for our kids. A lot of our curriculum was already online. We had print supports, but almost all of our curriculum was available online already. We already utilized things like Clever and Google Classroom, and so that shift was not as challenging as it might have been had we been in maybe 10 years ago when we were using a lot more print materials. We opened the Wednesday after the school shutdowns in our distance learning model. And I'm not saying it was perfect, but at least we were able to get kids online and working on some things. We did a ton of stakeholder outreach around what people wanted and needed at that time. So we talked to families, we talked with community partners around what they could help with. We started a partnership with T-Mobile to make sure we could get all the hotspots for all the kids who didn't have internet at home. But it was really like an all hands on deck kind of thing. And I think, what was really helpful is that I saw people kind of come together and be empathetic in a way that I've never seen before. And I think that helped us pivot and be flexible as things shifted and changed throughout the pandemic. In terms of like, could we come back? Could we not come back? Who was not able to come back to work, but could still work remotely, all of those things. I think we just really came together as a community. And I think the mission and vision alignment is really where that came from, right? Like we all knew that we were on board with trying to do what was best for students and families. And so we all kind of just did what we could, but all three of our sites are in 3 different counties. So we were working with 3 different health codes and 3 different sets of expectations. Wow. And so it was definitely a lot. But I think that some really great things came out of having to do that. So that's where our universal screener for mental health, we used to do it daily. We only do it weekly now. But that is how that was born, because we saw that we had a lot of kiddos who were just dropping off and not coming to class anymore. And a lot of times it was because some stuff was happening at home. And so that was a way for us to be able to support kids, even though we couldn't be physically there to support them. The differentiation that had to happen because of just the nature of online learning are things that we kept, as we came back in person. But that's kind of what our trajectory kind of looked like. I don't know if that 100% answers the question.
No, I think it absolutely does. Prior to shutdown, the SEL and certain buzzwords weren't as prominent. And it sounds like your mission statement was already kind of aligned with that, which sounds awesome. So speaking to the counties and the organizations, what organizations do you partner with? And this is kind of a 2-parter. When you talk about mission-based partnerships, what does that look like?
Oh my goodness. Well, I actually printed them because I don't ever remember all of the partnerships.
That's cool. Wait, can you hold it up just a little bit longer?
Yes. Sorry, hold on. Let me make sure it's in focus.
So you got UCI, you got church groups, health organizations, you got T-Mobile, which is a major corporation. So it sounds like a lot of different sectors and cross sections of industry you partner with.
Yep. So I think when you think about community partnerships and being strategic, right, you want to be able to make sure that you're partnering with people that fill a gap or fill a need that you can't fill in-house, right? And so things like the additional mental health supports, right? We don't have the capacity to provide all the supports that we might need. So we obviously have to do some outreach in terms of partnership for that. We do a lot of partnerships for our kids who are in the foster care system. So, Together We Rise is an organization that provides kind of like stuffed animals or backpacks or bags for kiddos who that is a really big thing for them, right? That's something we take for granted, that if I wanted to go take an overnight bag somewhere, like I could just grab one out of my closet, but like you don't think about that some kiddos don't have things like that. We partner with UCI in quite a few different areas. So we partner with their nurse practitioner program for them to help kind of provide some supports in that sense. We also partner with them for more on like the mental health side. And then we do a lot of health partnerships in terms of like dental care and, vision and hearing screenings.
pretty comprehensive, not just, it's physical health and mental health, but that's pretty neat. Again, we have about 5 minutes left, so I want to make sure I have some time for some of these questions. So I don't know if you want to just a quick rapid fire.
Sure, I'll try to be less wordy.
No, don't worry about it. I just want to make sure we fit in these questions. Student population. What's the student population like at you? Do you do TK through 12?
Right now we do TK through 8th. We do have an approval in Santa Ana to go through 12th grade, but as you might imagine, real estate is a challenge. So we are looking for a facility, but we cannot wait. Ideally, we'd love to build out TK through 12 so that we have the full, the kids all the way from age 4 to 18.
Yeah. Interesting. When it comes to the partnerships, because again, that was an impressive list of corporate and community partnerships. Grant writing and grant requests, is that something you specifically do? Is that in your shop, or how does that work?
I help with a lot of that. Most of that is done by our deputy director. So most of our partnerships, our strategic partnerships, we have like a chief community officer who is really in charge of like developing, finding and then developing out those partnerships. And then our deputy director really does a lot of our grant finding and writing. We all support in the ways that we need to, right? There's always an academic programming component of every grant and a data component. So I help in that sense, but I cannot take credit for all of the grants.
Got it. Wow. In terms of leadership, how do you continue to advance as a leader? What do you look for in terms of opportunity or certain skills that you're looking at?
Yeah, so I'm a huge reader. I'm like overly obsessed right now with organizational psychology.
Oh, cool.
So I do a lot of reading. I would love to one day get a doctorate, but I just don't have time right now. So that's on the back burner. But in terms of like day to day, I seek out, we talked about kind of mentorship. Like I seek out folks that have expertise that I don't have. I certainly did not have any expertise on community partnerships coming into this role. But I work with a wonderful woman named Kristen Crow, who is phenomenal at it. And so kind of learning from her. And then also just looking for professional development opportunities. Recently went to the California Charter Schools Association conference where we presented, but also I learned a lot of cool stuff. And so really just kind of, I think collaboration is huge for me. I think I have some great ideas occasionally, but they're never as good as if I talk to other people about them and build them in that way. So I think, those are kind of the buckets of how I professionally develop.
Yeah, very cool. Very important question. People want to know, are you hiring? Especially maybe from the public sector, or speaking of burnout, maybe it's that time of year where burnout is taking place. Are you expanding? You're hiring?
We are expanding and we're hiring. So we are super excited. We are building 2 brand new buildings, one in South LA and one in Santa Ana. And so we are really excited about our, teacher retention rates, but we are also doubling in size in both of those areas. So we are hiring teachers, we are hiring, instructional aides, special education aides, maybe even office support. I'm not 100% sure if we have already filled those positions or not, but we love to bring on great people. So you guys are welcome to share my contact information and then reach out.
Yeah, it's that time of year. If they wanted to apply, if someone was interested in applying, EdJoin.
EdJoin, yeah. We post on EdJoin and Indeed as well. But if you want to shoot me an email, I would be happy to kind of flag your resume. And
that's very nice of you. Very kind of you. You have direct in there.
Well, thank you for coming and listening to me talk for 45 minutes. Not many people want to do that.
It's been an awesome conversation. And I know before we started hopped on, you mentioned the possibility of maybe even expanding to the Inland Empire.
Yes.
As someone who teaches from Hemet in the Inland Empire, I'm a big proponent of the IE. So, and I know there's quite a few credential students and population.
Yeah. So nothing is like set in stone yet, but we are working on petitions for kind of the Riverside area and possibly other areas out there. When we're looking for places to expand, we look for the demographic that we serve. So we look for a high number of students who are in the free and reduced program. We look for a high number of students who are either experiencing homelessness or in the foster care system. And so there's quite a few pockets out there. but getting a charter approved is real political. So we'll see how it goes, but we're hopeful.
Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. Well, from Long Beach to Riverside, from all around Southern California, it sounds like your organization is doing awesome work. Taylor, I've really enjoyed having this conversation, and it's a nice opportunity during spring break, and just to really think about really the reason why we teach, right? I'm going to speak on behalf of teachers. Many of the things you mentioned, social emotional learning and trying to advocate and be supportive for students who really need. Look, it's hard for students to understand the legislative branch if they don't know where they're sleeping at night. And so it sounds like wonderful stuff happening over Scholarship Prep. So Taylor, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I'm going to turn it back to Noemi to wrap things up for us. So what a pleasure, Taylor. Thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a blast.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Taylor, so much for sharing your experience. We really appreciate taking the time during your spring break and hosting this during our special week of Ed Week at the campus. Taylor, before we go, if anyone wants to reach out to you, are you okay if they reach out to you on LinkedIn or just email you directly?
Yeah, you can reach out to me via LinkedIn. To be honest, I don't monitor my LinkedIn super regularly.
Okay.
So I have a slide with my contact information that I would be happy to share if you guys are okay with that.
Yeah, let me take down my slide. Great.
Taylor, I hate to extend our conversation, but beyond the time, but LinkedIn is not a big education industry, unfortunately.
Right.
I haven't opened up my LinkedIn in a long time, and not a lot of educators are on there. So I think email is always the best, right? The direct contact there. So.
All right. There we go. There's my contact information. This is my work email. Feel free to blow it up. I'm on it all the time.
Yeah, and please note that you are a student or an alum, so she could flag you down.
Yes, please let me know who you are so that I make sure to get back to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And for everyone else, thank you for attending. And again, please join us on our social media channels or visit our website to learn about future chats like this. We thank you for your time.